want me to read those?
Minutes from last meeting.
Uh-huh.
I had those as well, but if you want to read them, you can.
It's up to you. If you want to go that way, would that be better?
Go right ahead. Yes. So here we go, guys. We are going to call the meeting to order. And go ahead. Yes, sir. You may. Are you recording for us or no? The meeting?
Yeah. It's not online, but we're recording.
Just recording, not online yet. Perfect. All right, so we will call the meeting to order. On failure on my part, I'll go and admit that part where we do not have paper copies of the pieces we have today. Mr. Buckmaster, if you will, read the minutes to us from the last previous meeting. We do have a form. Mr. Joe counts with us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right here. He counts and Sam counts.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, get a little closer.
Just read it.
Code and Zoning Committee meeting minutes Tuesday, October 6, 2020, 7 p.m. at the Community Center. Members present: Landon Gully, White Jewel, John Oliver, Ken Buckmaster, Floyd Dickey, Steve Whitaker, Sam Edwards, Shane Burton. Not present: Gary Walsh, Mayor Stephen Chambers. Others present: David Nolan, Tommy McFarland, Mike Dice, Chris Gregory. Meeting call to order. Minutes of the last meeting read and approved. Under old business, first order of business was to elect officers for the next year. There was a motion by Shane Burton to retain the officers from last year, second by Steve Whitaker. Motion passed. Meeting was turned over to Code Inspector Sam Edwards, who discussed the proposed ordinance that would let the county adopt the suggested residential building codes from the state. Mr. Edwards read the ordinance, explained it to the committee, and noted that the option to require sprinklers in new housing was not in this ordinance. The group then discussed whether we should include or not. Mr. Jewell noted that if we include the sprinkler option, it would need a 2/3 majority vote to pass, not a simple majority. In the discussion, it was felt by some that this would make our county a leader in what will likely become a statewide requirement in the future. We would be ahead of the curve and could be a bragging point for a small county such as ours. Mr. Buckmaster had gone around the county and asked a large number of new homeowners their opinions. The majority felt sprinklers were a good idea and they wished that they had the option of putting them in their homes. Most of these were homes built as spec houses, and the purchaser was not able to make that decision. Mr. Gully had researched here and in surrounding counties and felt that the estimate for installation was more than we had originally been quoted, and that it was difficult to find someone certified to do the installation. Mr. Oliver was in favor of the sprinklers, but stated that in his opinion, this really should be the decision of the entire commission rather than just this committee. Mr. Jewell spoke in favor of the sprinklers. Local contractor Mike Dice spoke to the group and expressed the opinion that builders had enough to fool with as it was, and that this would put a strain on their ability to build a house in a timely manner. Said that it was difficult to find a person to do the work, and if you did, it was weeks before they could do the job. Mr. Burton asked Mr. Buckmaster, because of his fire department experience, if sprinklers would save lives and save people's homes. He said it would. Mr. Burton stated that was good enough reason right there to add the sprinkler option to the ordinance. Motion by Jewell to send the ordinance to the full commission with the understanding that sprinklers would be required in new home construction, second by Burton. Motion passed. It was agreed that a second ordinance would be prepared in case the sprinkler option was not approved by the full commission, as the county needs to have an updated building code. The ordinance would need to be voted on at 2 successive commission meetings. There being no further business, the meeting was adjourned.
All right, we've definitely heard. Thank you, Mr. Buckmaster, for the reading of this minutes. Mr. John Oliver, thank you for some very good minutes, as you write very well there with. Might take a motion, entertain a motion there to take those minutes as read. Mr. Dickey, you might. That might be a better spot for you there.
I'd make a motion, but I'm not a member of this.
I hear you.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes as read.
Second motion. Motion made there and seconded. All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. No nays. Motion passes. So our committee here is together today as we have been sent the 3 ordinances to look at. One of those being cluster mailboxes that have come to us. From my understanding, or lack of understanding, I understand that cluster mailboxes are now a requirement from the mail service. Is that correct?
Yes, from the post office.
Post office mail service, yes, sir. So that is a requirement no matter what. That one's one we need to, in my opinion, we can start off and have conversations on there. In this case, we were asked to look at the pieces of it. Now, there are some pieces in how this ordinance is written, if you want to explain some things that's saying, you're certainly welcome to. This ordinance was written in conjunction with the planning commission, is that correct?
It was, and GNRC was requested to write up their recommendation, which is what got approved by the planning commission.
This is, I'm sorry, there, this is this is the ordinance that we looked at, as the original code number on it, was 213-2021-02. If you might be looking at those codes from the original code, and I do apologize, I've got them in digital format here, and did not get them printed, therefore, so sorry about that, folks. Go ahead there.
So, just to explain where they came from, GNRC was requested to come up with the verbiage from their expertise on what this needs to look like. They bounced it through their legal staff, took all their notes from other counties, put it together, and this is what their recommendation was, and this is what was approved by the planning commission.
So what is defined as a subdivision in this planning commission here for when there will be a cluster mailbox?
So it technically, if it requires a site plan, then, and if it doesn't necessarily have road frontage and they're creating their own road, once that road is created, site plan is created, we have to establish where that cluster mailbox goes, because postal service is not allowed to go on private roads anymore. So we have to provide them access at the main road to that cluster mailbox.
So it has to be in adjacent to a already stated road.
Yes, so subdivision, when it's created, they put in a road. That road is not considered by the postal service as drivable. They pull up to the main road of their normal route, and they need a cluster mailbox to keep them out of the subdivision.
Was the mailman does not want to drive through the subdivision. He doesn't want to have to stop at every house.
The government doesn't want
Too much time.
The government doesn't want the mailman to drive through the subdivision.
Does the so the mailbox for this ordinance and what we're writing, we don't seem to have a lot of choices here in this case, but it does require that the mailman does not get off the already stated road. Is that what I just understood you say?
From my understanding from them, I've got several packets from them stating their intent, and that their intent is they will stick to the main roads owned by the county.
Mr. Dickey, you had a question?
I think the cluster boxes, it should be between the contractor and the post office and the government, and the owner and the zoning should not be involved in that. Because when you put cluster boxes there, who's going to be responsible to repair when the lower falls off?
There's part of mine that's been sent to us.
The homeowners association? No, you don't know, because when you put the cluster box there, and if it sits houses down, you know, you've got a person that can't walk that far. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think the mailboxes should be on the curb. Right there in front of the house where the people can be able to.
You talking about each house? You talking about each house?
What's that?
You saying you think the mailbox should be in front of each house?
Yeah, on the curb.
Well, the postal service not gonna let you do that anymore.
Well, like the postal service and the contractor worry about that, why should the government have to worry about it? I mean, it should not be an organ.
As far as what we were looking at, one, we could not worry about it, and then you can just let a contractor set it wherever they feel, and it become a mess. What we wanted to do was require the developer of that subdivision to put a dedicated lot for it. And it doesn't have to be a building lot, but an area that the subdivision will maintain. It gets back to what our discussion was on sidewalks, where they can maintain it, where they can repair it, where they can, like Mr. Dick said, do whatever needed to be done to it. That was the discussion we had. Am I right, Sam, when it came up? And that's one of the things we talked about with GNRC was just not sticking it on the road, because that's what they'll do. And if you can drive up to it, you're okay. But if you got to walk, or if you're in a wheelchair, or you're something like that, you're in a pretty dangerous situation there.
Yeah, because here you are, you got someone walking down by themselves in a cluster box, and they gonna get mud, you know, but somebody's gonna knock them in the head.
Well, that's why in this request in here, it specifically states, you know, they're gonna have a dedicated place for it, which the planning commission will decide where that's best located. They're also gonna be required parking spots dedicated just to the postal box.
And lighted, be a lighted area, that type of thing.
So for the people that actually do have to get out of their vehicle that, for whatever reason, can't drive up to it, they will pull into the parking spot, be out of the road, get out, do their mail, get back in the car. That was a safety concern.
What this ordinance basically does is it requires each developer to include this in their site plan, which then can be looked at by SAM and GNRC and the experts in the area, and make sure that it is a safe, accessible area for this.
There's definitely a lot of questions here on this part. Mr. Buckmaster, you got a question? If not, I'm gonna ask something first, or go ahead.
I just want to make a statement,
Say what?
the postal service is requiring cluster mailboxes. Doesn't matter what I think about a cluster mailbox, we've got to have a cluster mailbox. However, that being said, I will not be part of an ordinance that tells them where to put it. That's between the developer and the post office. That has nothing to do with this county government.
Before we go, there's a lot of pieces that are gonna get on this. We've got a lot to discuss here, don't get me wrong. And I appreciate it, and I want us to make sure we keep on those pieces. There's gonna be a lot of this and that's with this. I do have a question for you though as well. In this ordinance, it says they require lighting of that mobile. So in the county, if we build a subdivision that's not inside the city limits, who's paying the light bill for that required lighting?
The homeowner.
Homeowners association that you're gonna require now.
I don't know that we have a homeowner association required now.
Not until you.
So there's a lot
pass
of
this
pieces
ordinance.
that are coming to play. Inside the city limits, the city is going to put in lights. That's part of that's just part of the urban services side of things. Outside city limits.
So now, if I understand correctly, if somebody wants to put a subdivision in right now, and it's approved by our planning commission, whatever, the post office says they have to have cluster boxes. So all we're doing is saying that we're gonna make an ordinance requiring it to be part of their site plan so that we can approve it. If we don't approve it, it is just between the post office and the subdivision?
We're requiring some other things with it in this. That's what he's saying. We're requiring lighting. We're requiring a set lot with inside the piece. We're requiring, or this ordinance, I say this ordinance has been written to require lighting. A set certain number of parking spots based on the number of homes that are in the set number of parking spots is due to the number of homes per the plan. The cluster box is still going to be one cluster box from what I understand, no matter how large the subdivision is. But then the planning commission would decide and determine how many parking spots that is needed. I think right now the minimum of 3 is what you all stated.
It's 50 or fewer, it means 2 parking spots.
2 parking spots, I apologize.
And but now, this has been done in other places, so we're not unique in doing this, right?
One of the things about cluster box, they make the whole neighborhood look sloppy.
We can debate that part of it.
Yeah.
What we're here talking about is whether or not we're going to require how we want it to be required in our ordinance, or are we going to leave this between the developer and therefore the post office? That's where we are. Mr. Jewell.
I will say, having worked for the post office, you can decide in the planning commission where you want this, they don't care. They're gonna approve it, and you can say this is where we're putting it, the developer can say this is where we're putting it, and they can come in there and say, no, you're not, we want it over here.
That's where I was going to go next.
And I just want that to be known, that just because the planning commission approves it that way, doesn't necessarily mean the post office is gonna approve it that way.
I was just about to say, we're going to get into a battle here of the post office is going to state, here's where your mailbox goes.
Right.
The post office would become like any other entity that signs off on the site plan. They would have to approve that going forward.
Does it
Just
say
like-
that in your ordinance?
I don't know.
No, where I can see.
I don't know.
That was
That was my question.
I haven't read that in there, and I've read it a couple of times.
The biggest question that came up with the commission, I'll just try to throw it out right now, was a maintenance issue. Who is going to be responsible for this? Oh, the homeowners association. We have no homeowners associations in this county. We don't have any provisions on the books in any way to establish a homeowners association. What you have to do to have one. So until we get that decided on the books, you can't require an entity that doesn't exist to be responsible for something. So in talking with our legal counsel, he told me we're getting the cart before the horse. That you gotta, if you're gonna require a homeowners association to do something, you have to spell out what that is and what it takes to form that, how much money they have to have on deposit with who, for how long. That's a whole other issue that has to be worked out before you ever get into this.
And I think that's part of the piece here. Let's get to that part. I appreciate the view of trying to take a stand to get things moving ahead, to make things look in the right route. And I think, Mr. Kerr, you even said this well. You said there's some things that came up right here at the end that we didn't think about. We're all groups, and we have to have those conversations together.
That's right.
In that statement of things, though, we have a lot, as Mr. Jewell just mentioned, we have a lot of pieces to consider within where we're talking. The cluster mailbox is going to be done either way. We're not saying you got to put it in a cluster mailbox. The post office is saying you got to put it in a cluster mailbox. What we're trying to write is an additional piece on top of it right now in this case, that we're looking at how that's going to be done, how we would wish it to be done. Which I appreciate the planning commission making a look at that part of this case, but I think there's a lot of pieces that we need to look at going forward. And these things, same things are going to come up on these next two as well. There's a lot of conversation, and in my honest view on this, and looking into these pieces and talking with contractors and talking with others, we've got a lot of conversations to make here and chew through before we're able to make some real good pushes of where we are. I think we need to consider where we are. Well, yes, ma'am.
I'm not on this committee, but I'm on the planning.
I'm gonna let you talk. Yes, ma'am.
And then if you'll notice that the code you quoted was wrong, and it actually says the portion with cluster mailboxes.
The one I've got says 213-2021-02.
No, the ordinance for the cluster mailboxes is 213-2021-04.
I've got it backwards right here, then I apologize.
And then if you look, number 6 is the proposed change. In the post office, the postal service required cluster mailboxes
I did right.
in May of 2019. That's the postal service, not the planning commission.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the planning commission's responsibilities is to approve a site plan. This is on a new subdivision. Well, a developer has to propose, because a cluster mailbox is required, they have to put that in their site plan for us to approve it. So they have to say, we're going to put the cluster mailboxes here. And in the proposed amendment, it says that they'll contact developers and builders are required by the United States to notify the local postal service, and developers and builders should plan for them. So the developer is going to have to get with the postal service, and this ordinance requires them to do that. So that's why we want to pass
The
it.
postal service already requires it, I don't have to put it
I know,
out
but
in the regs.
we're looking at new developments. And unless you have to be able to tell, if you have a developer that wants to build a new subdivision, you have to give him some guidance. He has to have some guidance as to where to put this required mailbox.
Which will be given by the post office. But here's what I'm saying. Let's remember this part. I don't disagree with what you're saying on this cluster mailbox piece. What we're having a discussion here about, and where our disagreement is in funding of what's going to happen later on. Who's responsible when the mailman runs through the mailbox accidentally and then we get to get it fixed? I mean, who's responsible when someone comes through and hit and runs the mailbox and we don't know what happened?
Be more the hit and run or the normal maintenance of it into the future. I assure you, the postal service
Are not
is not going to be responsible for it. They're not responsible for your box on your pole right now.
That's correct.
That's your business. They tell you how tall, how big, and where, but they don't pay for it.
Let's do remember where we are here in this case. I agree, and I appreciate the way you're saying that part. Don't disagree with the facts of what you were trying to do. Just, I think there's a lot more pieces of question, in my personal opinion here. I'll step aside and say it that way. If you want me to step aside and say it, but that
What
we've
you
got to really
read has
consider.
already been passed, that's already been passed?
The Postal Service in May of 2019.
That's the
The
part.
Postal Service started this in 2020. They started saying that they didn't recommend, subdivisions that they wanted cluster mailboxes, but they didn't actually pass it until May of 2019. And then, so it wasn't an issue, but my whole thing is, if the developer, if they come to the planning commission with a site plan, in that site plan, part of our job is to make sure they have a cluster mailbox, because it's required by the post office. That developer's gotta have some kind of guidelines, there's gotta be some kind of guidelines as to where to put that. And if, by passing the ordinance, it'll say, you need to contact the postal service, you need to be in agreement, and they'll tell you where to put it, and then it can come before the planning commission and you can approve it. That's, you're not gonna, you can't stop development. You know, we've already got, there's been several plans that have come before us already that propose subdivisions that are coming, and they've got to move forward. They have to know where to put these cluster boxes, because it's required by the Postal Service. And so you've got, they have to have some kind of guidelines to go by. And that's all that's all we're intending to do, is to tell them, you know.
I know we need to do it, and I'm in favor of doing it. I'm just saying that when someone brings up a question of how is this going to be maintained, who's going to be responsible for it, the only response we have had is the homeowners association will take care of it. And there is no homeowners association.
But it's really not our responsibility anyway. It's not our problem how they fix it, that's the builder's problem.
Exactly.
No, once the builder sells the lots and
No,
gone.
the builder, he'll think of that, don't worry.
By my experience, working for the Postal Service, Postal Service is not going to repair that cluster box. They will not do it. They said if the homeowners association or the owner who owns that property.
So folks, we know, and I appreciate it, we know that those hurdles are not ours to cross. We can debate and discuss those all day long. You're exactly right. This is going to be left up to that's the problem. The who is it left up to and how is it left up to them is where we're really sitting here at.
That's right.
We know it's left up. That's where we're sitting here.
Basic line is, do you want a developer just doing it whatever they want to do, or do you want to have some local eyes looking at it, making sure that it's done safely and that it's included in their site plan and everything, where they have to do it right?
I think we also know that the Postal Service is going to ensure certain areas about where it's going to be done.
Sure.
No matter what, you don't have to say over them. You can't say, no, you're going to put it here. No, post office is going to say,
Exactly.
you're going to put it here. But I think there are some pieces inside here, as you said, the lighting. When you said that a minute ago, Mike, I went back and read it, and I don't remember reading that lighting part in it.
The post office is
I'm
not
sure it's
going to
there.
be concerned with these residents getting to that box.
That's correct.
They're only going to be concerned about their postal carrier getting to that box.
Speed and
away
time.
from that box. And, you know, I see the necessity of it. I understand why they're wanting to go that direction, having carried mail. It's needed, but, you know, the question is, who's going to be responsible for it when something happens 2 years to come? And if we can answer that question, then I don't think there's any commissioner that wouldn't be in favor of it in light of the circumstances. But that was the question on it, is who is going to be responsible, and the response was the homeowners association. That does not exist, no provisions for one, what you have to do. I mean, are you going to require them to put up a bond like you do on roads if they haven't built the roads yet? I mean, we have those provisions. It would be in the same light as that. I mean, this is done, obviously, all over the country. I don't think we're trying to reinvent the wheel with the homeowners association. But somebody from legal needs to look at that and decide what needs to be
We have to draft something.
drafted and how, and to cover all these bases.
Yes, sir, Mr. Bookmaster.
So, like you said, we don't have a homeowner association now. Does anybody know who's taking care of the cluster mailboxes that are in Clinton County now? Because we have those already. How are those?
We were required to put them in at the housing authority, campuses, and if I assure you, if they get torn down, we pay to put them up, we'll have to pay to put them up again. But that property as a whole, we have that responsibility. Now, the apartments that have them, it's an apartment building, I'm sure that apartment building is not owned by individual property owners, and that's where most of them have been. Most of them have not been out here in the neighborhood.
You got one out here on Murray, up here by the church.
Yeah.
Who's taking care of that one now? I think there's one out on 231 at that new development now, isn't it? The Honey Hills?
Not that I'm aware of.
There's one. There's one.
I
There's
thought I
one
saw
down
one
there.
out there.
So who's responsible for
So
those?
who's taking care of those? Somebody's already.
Fortunately, we haven't had that issue yet.
Somebody's already addressed this problem.
They didn't have to address it because there was no regulations for them to include that when they came for their site plan.
So they didn't have to work that through them, they just worked it through them.
They just did it.
To the post office.
Post office, is that correct?
And if that's what you're wanting to do, if you want it, we have nothing in our ordinances about cluster mailboxes.
Here.
They're required, and you can either tell them how to do them, or you can let the developer, like I said, put them wherever they want to.
That's right.
Well, they're not gonna put them where they want, they're gonna put them where
They're
they,
gonna let the developer.
They're gonna put them where the-
Post office comes.
But this
Post office.
requires, this ordinance will require them to go to get approval from the post office, not to, which I'm sure a contractor would either.
they have to.
I'm not
It's already
saying
required.
Right now, as it is, there's no ordinance at all that says anything about cluster mailboxes.
It's not required by us, but it is required by the post office.
That's right.
That's what we're
So
saying.
you
If
can't.
those people are gonna get their mail, they're gonna put up a cluster mailbox where the post office says to put it.
Well, I can see what we need, if the post office requires it, because you guys have to approve the site plan, we can pass an ordinance that says any subdivision that has a cluster mailbox will be required, like he says, the standard to parking spots and lighting and so on. We don't have to worry about who replaces it, that's not our problem. That's not our responsibility. We can say if you put a cluster mailbox in there, what the post office requires, you will have to have lighting, you will have to have a handicap parking spot, you have to have so many parking spots for how many houses, and just leave it at that. That gives you guys something to say to the developer, well, our requirements are, you have 3,000 homes, you have to have 85 parking spots or whatever. Because you have something to back up on. But I don't think the problem of paying for it is not our problem. Any subdivision is gonna have a homeowners association eventually. They'll do something, I'm not worried about that.
Is the home,
You don't have any.
Sam.
So,
But we don't have these.
Thoroughbred doesn't have a homeowners association, nobody has a homeowner, there are none.
Mr. Edwards has the floor
Find
for a
me
second.
one neighborhood in this county that has a homeowners association.
Did somebody say we did?
He just said they're gonna have one, they're all got one.
Let's,
I don't know.
Do you know?
you got one?
yeah, I looked for one here a second ago. Didn't have one. Mr. Edwards, I'm gonna give you the floor. And I do want us to remember here, folks, we're not discussing whether or not people are gonna have cluster mailboxes. Cluster mailboxes are done. We're not discussing where the cluster mailbox is gonna go. That's gonna be decided by the post office. I think we have a legitimate concern. Now, I'm gonna disagree with the comment of leaving it on the people. I think it's our job to make some opportunities for how that's gonna be done and not leave it to somebody else to decide later on and cause an issue. I think it's better to take the upfront charge, in my personal opinion, instead of causing an issue later on, is my opinion. On that, that is truly my opinion on that part. And I understand well where the ordinances they're looking at are coming from.
Just trying to get ahead of it.
I see where we're going. Sam, I'm gonna let you have the floor.
I'd like to be given a chance to try to get us back on track and maybe clarify some things. 'Cause we seem to be going in a circle. So this started with the discussion on the site plans coming in. We've got all these new subdivisions. They were talking about the cluster mailboxes and safety concerns on how are they going to be getting to these cluster mailboxes. Now, originally they were put on the curbs. Okay, well, some people can pull up to these and get their mail. The people that can't will have to get out. Well, is that a safety concern? Well, it's determined that it was a safety concern that people would be getting out into the road to get their mail, or potentially going to their house, walking down and getting their mail. Well, how are they getting down there? Are they walking through the road? So that's how all this came up. Now, to address this being written, it was, as everybody's mentioned, the postal service's requirement. It's done and over. It has to be done. All the contractors know that. They know if they do a site plan, they gotta have it. It was Greater National Regionals Council's opinion and advice to us, it is in our best interest to get it in our ordinance, where it's not just the Postal Service's rules. We're also backing the Postal Service up with our ordinance that it is required. Now, there are some things in here that were mentioned that were added for those safety concerns that I spoke about, how are people getting the mailboxes and the safety aspect of it. Now, the parking places was part of that fix. Making it on a dedicated lot is just logical because it cannot be in somebody's yard. So they're trying to have a dedicated lot like you would a gravesite. You cut off a small acre, there's no rules that define that. We are putting in this our recommendations for safety to help with the cluster mailbox situation that we have no control over. So they're gonna happen. Do we want to add safety features to it? Is the question. And like I said, GNRC is telling us it is in our best interest to make sure we're backing up the Postal Service with our own stuff.
But with that stated, we could just state, hey, we have an ordinance that backs the code that was written by our postal service. Here's the code, it goes along with our ordinance, we've supported it there. We are adding some pieces, and I appreciate you being honest there, saying we're adding some pieces here.
The safe, for our,
We call it
what was determined the safety aspects, but what we've determined so far speaking is that we need to come up with rules that define a homeowners association. We've already established that the boxes are happening. We need to discuss the safety aspects that are in here, which ones we don't like, if they need to completely go and just do what was mentioned, just put a simple statement that we're backing up whatever rules they have.
So GNRC has asked us to back up their rules.
They said it's in our best, how they word it?
Interest.
It's in our best interest to make sure we have something in our ordinance that's stating that.
Taylor.
Having lived in a neighborhood that had a HOA in the past myself, and several family members who have recently built houses in new subdivisions, what I'm learning from them is that when the developer goes to do a site plan, included in that is required by the county that they're doing it in, included in that is everything laid out from how wide the streets are, the street lighting, sewer, water, any easements that have to be there, along with cluster mailboxes. And then if there is a required HOA, I'm learning as I'm talking to family members who are going through this, that the builder, the developer who sells the lots to the approved builders who's going to build on that street, they have the developer himself has to start the HOA, and he has to do whatever he's got to do legally to do it. Because when I was talking to my brother who's building a house, one of these things, he's like, we looked at the plans and they come back and hit us with all this stuff. We're going to have to join this HOA, and it's retroactive to day one from us before we signed the paper, before they even break ground. We're already paying HOA dues. And I'm like, is that right? I thought that was when you moved in. And he said, no. And he said, when you buy the property, you are now subject to the rules of the HOA. And I said, well, who established the HOA? And he said, believe it or not, the builder or the developer had to start it to get the approval of to get the permits to build.
That was within the county's.
Within the county, but he said, that's pretty much, I'm like, is that real? And he said, that's a real thing everywhere.
And that's why we're here on
It's
more
my
than
understanding the
So if a
builder.
builder's gonna build a place in that county, he's gonna have to submit the plan after he works it out with the post office for where the cluster mailbox is gonna go. That's gonna have to be signed off on just like everything else.
So I'd like to add to that, because I can expand upon it.
Yes,
I lived in HOA for 3 years when I first got married, and the developer, when they're developing that site, they hire a company usually that deals with HOAs. And that company creates the HOA and all the rules that go with it, and the builder has to agree upon that. Now, our subdivisions are already doing that without the HOA, like, I don't want to name names, but they set restrictions on the properties. They are already doing that process. This is just expanding upon now they're requiring payment for taking care of things.
When you sell a piece of property, you set the restrictions you want and how that property is going to be built on.
Yes.
That's, whether you're selling a 5-acre or 30-acre farm that you split up, you're still going to set what restrictions. I want this type of home built here. I want a site-built home. It's okay. Those are
developer comes up.
whether it's the developer or the people selling the property.
In accordance with our ordinances.
That was where I was fixed to get into. We are now, that's what we've been tasked with. And hey, we've got a lot of questions still here to answer. The cluster mailbox, as we've all established, is there to stay. That's not an area until.
I have a question. Have you done your research in different counties, like Davidson County, tell you how they're doing it, or Summit County?
GNRC always looks at your surrounding counties and sees how they're worded in those counties, because that's where your people are coming from. People that moving here are coming from Sumner, Wilson, and all around the world.
If you're asking about having done research
No,
on the
sorry.
HOA policies, I have not done research on other people's HOA policies because I could be incorrect, I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is the developer is the one that sets the HOA policies, and usually they hire a company to maintain it. So
You can voluntarily establish one, but usually the municipalities have guidelines and certain minimum requirements for you to legally establish one that have to do with the financial arrangements of how much money is going to have to be contributed, how it's going to be kept in escrow, who's going to be responsible for it, who's going to make the decision to suspend it, what it's spent on, for how long. All of those type of things are spelled out in that agreement. And it's a very tedious legal document, and I'm sure there's tens of thousands of them that we can look at to see what's normal. But if you're going to depend on an HOA to enforce these things or to take care of the maintenance of them, you have to have a vehicle in place to do that legally, according to our county attorney. Now, that has nothing to do with cluster mailboxes other than if you're going to say an HOA is going to take care of it. You can say all day long, we want you to put these cluster mailboxes in, planning commission's going to approve them, the post office is going to sign on them, and they're there. The question came up, then what? And that's all that we're really talking about. I think we all know that we're going to need to do the cluster mailboxes, and the post office is going to have to approve it. But the question is, who is going to be responsible into the future for even paving that area? Or if that sidewalk crumbles and you replace it, who's paying for it? Contractor ain't gonna pay for it. He sold all the lots and he's over here building something somewhere else. You can forget about getting the contractors to do anything. So if you don't have some vehicle like a homeowners association, those future maintenance issues, and we've run into it for 100 years in this county, where somebody comes in, they put a dirt gravel road down through, they sell lots, people build houses, all of a sudden, when's the county gonna pave my road? It ain't a road, it's your driveway, and we don't pave your driveway. And so I don't want to add to that. I don't want a reason for John Q. Public to get mad at us for not doing something that's really not our responsibility to do.
100%.
And
why we didn't protect them up front, it's protection.
So, I think we can pass an ordinance requiring the planning commission to look at cluster mailboxes, to get approval of, before, and leave this question, like John says, nebulous, just that ain't our problem, let them worry about it. But it will become our problem, is my point.
So here's where I'm at. I think the next two ordinances that we're going to discuss as well are going to have the same conversation, just to be honest with you. I think when we're talking about the sidewalks, one of the sidewalks in city limits and the other is the sidewalks in, it's covering sidewalks for the whole county as well. True. Okay, when we build a subdivision. So that's going to come up with the same conversation we're at right now. what I think I hear this committee saying is we need to ask, in my opinion, we need to ask an individual to draft some of these pieces of how an HOA, if we're gonna look at an HOA, we're gonna look at those pieces and we're really considering that we're gonna require that piece. If we're considering these pieces, then we're going to have to look carefully into those pieces. We'll have to take a little time and draft something. At this point, it's where it's at now. We're not changing anything, it's already there.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
the sidewalks, as you said, they're actually basically the same thing. I don't think anybody questions the safety aspect of what sidewalks cause or the reason for them. And that, it's future maintenance.
That's great.
Just like we're talking about here.
That's
And
great.
that's where the HOA discussions always came up. I mean, personally, as far as what I think minimum wise, you would require them to take care of the cluster mailboxes and the sidewalks. Some homeowners association, which my little sister lived in one in Memphis, they took care of everything on the outside. If one building needed painting, they painted them all. If one got a roof, they all got a roof.
And the mowing and the trimming
Right.
and weed eating and
Landscaping.
everything.
And that was very expensive. They all donated and they were all members. What I'm saying, from the minimum, in order to protect the taxpayer of Trousdale County, it's the cluster mailbox, somewhat, but the sidewalk especially.
Okay.
I think if we get to
And
those
if we
pieces,
need legal help, which I think we do, the way Mr. Jules talked about it, what is the process of getting the county attorney to come to a planning commission meeting so that we can get the help that we need?
Ask him to do that.
I think if we get something drafted, we can send it to him. Mr. Beller's very good at getting
That's
us
fine,
back.
I don't know,
to
man. That's why I'm asking, what is the process?
I think I can fix this question.
So, I think as we look along the way, we know where we are, we know what we're looking to get accomplished.
Right.
If we, as a committee, look at the fact that we've got ordinances in front of us, I think these ordinances themselves have too many questions before them right now that we've got to get answered before we can get to these questions, which came up, and it's good. It gets us having a good conversation here.
I don't want anybody to think I don't want to do this. I want us to do this. I want us to put these regulations in place for the cluster mailboxes. I want us to require these sidewalks. It's just, before you get this passed, for the commission that I chair, there's gonna be too many questions about who's gonna take care of it, or it ain't gonna pass.
That's where I
So
started.
you're wasting your time if you don't go ahead and address that. So we've got to go the way he just said.
And that's what I think. And here's where I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a little bit new to this piece. What would be the process?
I think I can fix this conversation.
Hang on, before we get that way.
So we can move on to the other stuff. I mean,
If you hold this second, what is the process that we need to take? I wish we had Mr. Bell here. What I think I'm hearing is we need to develop a ordinance that talks about HOA. Whether that needs to be done through the planning commission, probably first, be my opinion.
I would reach out to Mary with GNRC to see if they have a boilerplate template that they've used in other jurisdictions that have faced this before. If we have something to look at, start with, and go with. If they say they don't, then just ask the county attorney to investigate it and to develop something.
That's where I was
It's
thinking
that simple.
myself.
And,
I don't
you know.
And that's what I'm saying. I don't know.
You as chairman of planning can ask him to do it. You as chairman of this committee can ask him to do it. I can ask him to do it. It'll get done, but somebody's got to ask him. He's not just going to take it on himself to do it. But I would first start with GNRC, with Mary, and see if they have something, or they can offer something. She may have already anticipated and halfway had it put together. I don't know. But I just, I would start with that route, let planning see if they can get something through GNRC, or just look at some of the other ordinances in the surrounding counties and see what they do that require this. Most of them do require it. As far as I know, the cost was an issue with some of the commissioners. What's this going to cost the builder to do it? I talked to a concrete man tonight, 1 hour ago, who quoted me. He said on a normal home block, putting a sidewalk all the way across the front would run somewhere from $750,000. Well, I'm sorry. And that's high. He said on a 100 to 150 foot lot. That's what he said. Okay, that ain't a deal breaker on a house. That ain't a deal breaker for a contractor building a $300,000 house. Okay, his house costing $301,000, I'm sorry. But to be in a neighborhood with full sidewalks, the safety of it, the looks of it, it's an investment he's gonna make back.
Yeah, when this piece came up to us in the work session, I went and talked to some builders, just to see where we were on it. The actual cost of it, you might be adding as, I got from $1,000 to $3,000 on the home.
I guess it would depend on the footage.
Some of it more depended on the, elevation of grain that we're talking about, the type of property we're talking about. There were some extras in that, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 150-foot lot, 150 foot of sidewalk in front of a home will cost somewhere around $3,000.
And that will increase the value of that lot that the developer's gonna save. The developer, they're gonna recoup their investment from the buyer of that lot, which means that he's gonna ask more for the price of that lot, which means now that lot is priced higher, which means its tax value is now higher.
That's correct. I think now what we're looking at past that is what happens.
Future maintenance.
What happened.
That's where we want to manage these things in the future, or just let them go.
And especially with the ones that we've been asked, the ones that are in these ordinances, and I know we're getting a little ahead of ourselves and stuff, but we're still having the same conversation.
And it may be that just like with roads, okay, if they put it into a certain standard and once it's done, we take it over. If it has to be patched 20 years from now, the county's responsible for it. I don't even have a problem with that if that's what we say we're going to do. You know, I mean, I don't have an issue that people are paying taxes. You know, it'll have to come out of their taxes, but if that solves this issue of future maintenance.
I think we've had a good conversation about HOA being able to solve part of that issue for future.
But I'm saying, we're doing it down roads, we're not requiring an HOA to take care of the road. The paving, I mean, we could, literally, if we don't want to turn it over to again. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some deeper pieces.
But I'm just saying, so.
I can tell you one story right quick, though.
Go ahead.
Sulphur College, the development down there by Mosaic, their original plan was a gravel road that the homeowners would just take care of. That was their original plan. That's what developers will do. They'll come in here.
I hope you didn't let them do that.
We did. They're having to put in a road that's
curved and road,
and it's going to be accepted by I forgot his name. The road commissioner. You know, but that was their original intent, was a gravel road, and then it's just, dudes, whoever you live there, it's your baby.
Well, that's what I say so many times. That's what we've allowed to happen.
Well, and we also have to have some pieces here where we have some ordinances that say, here's what you're going to do.
But we have to have the authority to do that.
Agreed. And that's what we're looking at pieces along the way. It's how this conversation's come up. Mr. Buckmaster. Mr. Buckmaster.
I didn't know I was next or not. I wanted to clarify, like Mr. Kerr, Mr. Buell said, nobody's questioning whether we want it. I'm questioning it. I will not vote for sidewalks, cluster mailboxes. That's a dog I don't want to put in the race. I live 450 feet from my mailbox down the road. I walk to my mailbox to get my mail. I stand on the side of the road with traffic running 35, 40 miles an hour. I've lived there 26, 27 years, never had a problem. In a subdivision, it's 15, 20 miles an hour. If the developer wants to put a sidewalk in, let him. If he wants to put parking places in with the cluster mailbox and lights and signs and strobe lights, let him. That's not something that we need to put a dog in the race.
You know, you have your opinion in this case, Mr. Dick?
The question I have is, how did the National Homeowner Association, how did that get established in a subdivision when you're building one? Is that something that people vote on, or?
That's what we're talking about, actually getting that law written in together here. How does that get, so it would be from us. We're gonna say it has to start here, and it would start from there. It sounds like to me it starts from the developer, and that would be something we would have to look at the,
according to our
planning commission. I was about to say, the planning commission would set up.
There is nothing to keep someone from doing one today.
Correct.
They can do it voluntarily, but you have nothing that requires them to. And if you're going to require them to take care of things, then you have to have laid out what it takes to do that. That's
I mean, there's some other pieces to think about, exactly as you said. There's landscaping around the cluster mailbox. There's paving around the cluster mailbox. There are pieces that if we are lighting, that one's still getting to me a little bit, that we gotta pay for a light on that, piece. Somebody's gotta pay for that light. I mean, just being honest with you, it has a cost.
We
Pieces.
can get it in the dark, I don't really care.
That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying, you say it's in the ordinance, but we didn't think about the
I don't,
cost of it.
I thought it was, it may not be, to be
Okay.
honest with you.
What I'm saying.
It's not an ordinance.
in the neighborhood.
Miss Mary Ann's saying it's not. Okay.
They're gonna put a light.
I didn't read it.
If it gets dark at 4
I
o'clock,
didn't
I'd
read
like to have a little light if I had to go get
It was
my mail.
discussed, it's not in there.
It's not in there. I couldn't read it in there. I've read through it now. I read through it again here just a minute ago to make sure I didn't miss it.
Okay, like I said, it,
I completely understood.
It's proposed lighting, so there's a section, but it's proposed.
Oh,
It's
okay, that's
not
Okay.
required.
All right. I didn't read the requirement. I was making sure that. But anyway, conversations as we are. Sam, you had something to put in front of us. I think where we are, folks, and you're welcome to speak, but I think where we are is we see a need to move towards a conversation here of if we're going to look at ordinances like these in the future or these in the future, then we need to first look at an HOA established and what we're going to require within that within a subdivision before we require these other pieces. And hey, you know what? One thing brought one to another. We needed another understanding. There's goods that come from the conversation. If someone wants to live in a neighborhood with a homeowner association, the choice they make.
they don't have to buy it.
They don't have to buy that. So I'm okay with that side of it. I'm not making us, we're not talking about an HOA for Travis County, we're talking about an HOA for a subdivision as it comes in. So let's hear where we are. And I think to me, that's where we are. Looks like I'm gonna get in touch with Mr. Beller myself, and I'm sure Mr. Kerr will probably get in touch with Mr. Beller too.
Well, Sam can get in touch with Mary, and like Dwight said, if they have ordinances for these that just need to be tweaked to meet our thing, then she could bring that back, and we wouldn't have to pay for Mr. Beller's time for him to show up. I think we should explore that first, and then go there if we need to.
Well understood.
We don't really need to vote anything, we usually tell Sam to come back with the next meeting or next 2 meetings. And
That's what I think we're looking at exactly.
What's the proper motion? Is it table or is it, there's another one?
we haven't really,
You can table with the time to the front.
we
but at this
haven't,
point, we're not.
we haven't introduced an ordinance, so,
I'll just bring it back in front of y'all now.
yeah, he can just come back. But if he'd actually brought it, like if somebody had made a motion for an ordinance in a second, then you have a discussion, then you table the discussion. We haven't actually had an ordinance.
Tabling something means that you're putting it out to the end of the meeting, you're gonna take it back up in that meeting.
Yeah, there's
If you're
another.
gonna take it up in another meeting, you're gonna postpone it to the next.
That's the term we're looking for.
Yeah,
We
that's,
haven't
You can say that as
introduced an
an
ordinance yet.
We were tasked with these ordinances from the commission.
Oh, for the
So
ordinance.
these ordinances were given to us from the commission to go over.
yeah, they want us to do something with it.
Yeah, we've got to do something. So I think we do need to have that
So in
postponed.
other words, it could be postponed until we get further information.
That's,
Okay.
we're looking for further information on the homeowner association piece that we've had that conversation. We will take ordain a motion in that favor. Are you making that motion? Mr. Dickey with that motion? Second, Mr. Buckmaster for the motion that we are postponing these 3 ordinances that are in front of us. Am I putting words in your mouth? All 3 of them we're talking about in this case? Okay. Until let's go next month. Is that enough time, Sam, to get in touch with GNRC? So we'll try to, we've got a lot of meetings in May. Mr. Jewell, do you know,
When the budget meeting start?
I've gotten it written down.
Used to be June all the time.
We got, there's a budget, third and sixth.
We'll have a working budget by the end of May.
Sir.
Maybe. We'll have a working budget by the end of May.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
Maybe.
That's awesome.
Y'all
It's
don't
May
know,
third, sixth,
Y'all,
eleventh,
who's y'all?
May third.
You have our budget by the 1st of May. That's all.
can you get your man to give it to us, man?
Guaranteed.
so what's the 18th of May look like?
What,
That's a Tuesday night, I think.
Tuesday
we
night?
got budget, let me look. Let me get to the right page, and I'll tell you. My fingers don't work as fast as yours, I'm no
That's on a Tuesday.
Yes, sir. It's almost a month from, the 19th would be 4 weeks from now, so
On the Wednesday?
that would be a Wednesday. I was trying to go back. Only reason we did it
Right now,
Wednesday.
there's nothing on May 18th that I see on the calendar.
I wouldn't be able to attend a school board work session.
Yeah.
Would you rather do that on the
Budget
19th?
is,
Wednesday?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have anything on Wednesday.
Is a Wednesday okay by members here? Okay.
I'm not saying I have to be
you have
here.
one of your
I'm just saying-
members that objected to us having this meeting tonight because they have church on Wednesday night.
The reason I had it on Wednesday is because Wednesday was pretty open. for the,
I'm just,
I'm with you 100%. I didn't have anyone contact me on that part, but I appreciate that they,
well, they contacted me.
I understand completely.
I told them to contact you, you were the chairman, and you called me.
I did, and I was, the reason of calling that meeting on the 18th was, on the Wednesday night was because of getting in around other meetings, as it's hard to sometimes get those in. I was fine with the 18th, but.
I would think, right now, I mean, 18th, or you could even move it into that next week, there's not a lot of.
Can't move it into that next week. I'm in Florida.
Some things
I'm gonna go sunbathing, man.
So, do you have anyone else for the planning commission that you would be willing to stand in your place there in this case? I appreciate you being here as the chair of the planning commission.
Mary Ann, you mind coming on the?
Oh, the one, 18?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
She likes to talk.
I do, and I would just please, anybody and everybody, the planning commission meetings are open, and I'm new to that committee, they're very informative. The planning commission in no way is trying to push sidewalks, push cluster boxes. I think we're just trying to make sure things are done safely and properly. Like I said, the site plans come to us, and you'd be surprised, I'm amazed. We'll get a site plan, and it's like with this cluster mailboxes, are we to not approve it because we don't, and what if a developer comes to us next month and says, here's our site plan, they have a cluster mailbox, what are we supposed to do? Approve it or just not do anything because it's been postponed? Are we supposed to tell that developer, no, we can't?
Did it follow the postmaster's rules?
Well,
Let me tell you, you can think like that, but I've been on the planning commission for over 25 years, and the wife was the builder. I don't ever remember a site plan coming, even for final approval, that they didn't have to put things on it they had left out.
Yep.
They're supposed to know, but they don't. And if you let them leave them out, they'll leave them out, and then they won't do them.
But you have
That's why I
this
say keep using the word management.
to answer this question, you at this point have rules for cluster mailboxes. The Postal Service has written those rules for us. We've been asked to.
We don't have an ordinance to.
We've been asked to support them with an ordinance, and we will.
Well, we didn't pass it. The commission didn't pass it.
We don't need one, the post office has one.
Right.
Follow the post office's rules.
Let's keep ourselves together here.
Right now, if you have no ordinance on cluster mailboxes, just don't look at that on the site plan until we have it. And if it meets the post office's requirement, approve the site plan and let it go, just like you did 1 year ago without it. Until this is on the books, I wouldn't hold people up because we're trying to do something or thinking about doing something. If it meets the requirements you've got now, then you need to go ahead and.
I agree with you. I think he's right, Mary Ann. You just have to go with what rules you have now.
What we have now.
Yeah.
Well, I just see what so many people have said about this streetscape down here, how it was the turns, I've got.
It's called TDOT, Tennessee Department of Transportation, that is a state highway. They designed it, they approved the design.
But they don't get the calls from the public.
They didn't
don't get
ask
the calls
us how
from
we
the public.
did
We
it.
did. Why did y'all approve that? You know, that's the calls why
We
did y'all?
approved paying for it, but we
So,
didn't.
I just-
They
Randy, you got a motion in a
Okay.
second.
So, I was just about to say, we do have a motion, second on the floor to postpone these pieces.
Wait, motion by Buckmaster.
No, motion by Mr.
Motion by
Dickey here,
second.
and second by Mr. Buckmaster, to postpone the ordinances, in front of us today. That would be ordinances, if you want to put those in number 213-2021-02, same number with an 03 behind it. Those two just deal with, sidewalks in the county and in the, city, in the urban service area. And the same number again, 213-2021-04, which deals with cluster mailboxes. So we are postponing those until we are brought back information concerning HOAs to discuss first.
Can I say one
I don't know
thing?
why they have
The
to.
Postal Service, when they approve, when they contracted, do want to set the mailboxes, the post office does designate an area for them to put it, so there's no way out of it.
Mhm. That's what I'm saying. They're doing that part. Yeah. We do have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please let it be known by a raised hand. Any opposed? None opposed.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
Did we decide on the 18th?
We did not. We're gonna finish up on the 18th. That's what we were trying to get into, the add in of it. Postponed until when, but we have not finalized. And what I was gonna ask is, when is the next planning commission meeting?
It's always the second Monday of the month,
So that would be.
whatever
10th.
that. Yeah,
The
whatever.
10th. Is that enough time for you to get your information so we can coincide with that meeting?
I could say yes, but
I know.
I'm not counting.
I understand that completely. May 10th is pretty short. Mr. Jewell?
I'd say maybe, but probably not.
They have their own attorneys, and however long it takes them to do their research, I can't speak to.
So what it sounds like I'm hearing is we need to set that forward, so it'll be the second Monday in June. That'd give them ample time.
You might see what, I mean, they may be like the White said, they may have a boilerplate, as he called it.
Why don't you let Sam talk to him tomorrow? This
That's what I
week?
said.
Yeah.
That was my point.
I
You
can
call it,
get
man,
that.
you don't have to set your date now.
You and I can make that discussion then, we'll set a date. I was gonna put the date, I thought we had to have a date with a postponement.
We postponed it till we had more information.
Okay. That's where I messed up. I thought a postponement in the parliamentary procedure says you had to have a date.
And I would say, if you're not gonna require an HOA, then the HOA thing can be handled at any time. If you wanna pass this, or try to, that's fine. I'm just saying, you can't say it's gonna be them when you have no vehicle.
I think we have to have, in my personal opinion, I think we need, if you're gonna choose to live in those subdivisions that were built in that way, it has that HOA that goes with it. The county set this aside so that pieces would not be falling upon others, to my personal opinion. If others disagree with that, you're more than welcome to. That's what we're here for in discussing that piece. But I think we need to look myself at the direction of moving an HOA first.
I've got one question. When this initially came up, I'd asked Mary, and if this needed to be an ordinance to come before the county commission. And she told me that it didn't, that it was strictly in the subdivision regulations, which is a function of the planning commission, that they would approve it for their subdivision regulations, and that it wouldn't require an ordinance.
She told me that and I don't know why it's here, the urban service section is under the purview of the planning commission. And we have already passed that. The county court doesn't speak to that issue. The county's building regulations, which are different.
They're different.
They're not like they're two different.
They're different, but
Right.
they're still ordinances.
The county commission speaks to that ordinance and the cluster mailbox.
Well, I think the Hartsville ordinances and the Travis County ordinances would be the purview of the county commission. The subdivision regulations.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, they don't just apply to Hartsville, they apply to the county as well.
I thought there was a separate one for the urban and the rural, so. Okay. Isn't that what we were told, Sam?
So my understanding is, we've already passed the subdivision regulations, I've got it in here, the portion that belongs to subdivision, which I was actually just reading through. We are adding the verbiage to the county and the city rules.
Why? If it only is going to apply to new subdivisions and subdivision regulations, and y'all are deciding what a subdivision is, and does it meet the requirements, we don't have a vote in that. We don't get to vote on whether this plat is approved. That's your subdivision regulations, that's the planning commission. I was told early on that this would not be before the county commission. Then it's on our agenda, and I don't even understand why we are trying to add it as an ordinance. It seems like it just needs to be a function of the subdivision regulations, which is yours, not ours, county commission.
I will get a statement from GNRC on why.
Well, I mean, I had sent her an email when this first came up, and y'all were talking about it, planning. Would this need an ordinance? And she assured me, no, it's strictly on the subdivision regulations. So that's what, particularly the cluster mailbox part. I don't see why we need to get into that dog anyway. That's in your requirements for subdivision.
That's fine. We're just going to put GNRC as told.
So I've got they're written, they wrote this, and it is written for city and county.
I
as well as
understand, I
subdivision.
just wanna know when she went from it not being to it being, and no one told me that it was or why, I guess.
I'll get a statement.
Yeah, because I'll show you the email, I saved it, I mean, I've got it, where she said it would not require more.
If you get an email answer, Sam, could you, CC me on that you send to Mr. Jewell?
That would be great.
And I'm just saying that we may be doing things we don't have to do.
That's always good.
No, but
All I know is these came to the county court. The county court has asked that they come back to this zoning and codes ordinance meeting. And I don't know why they came to the court in the first place, but I do know.
Well, it probably should have come here first. It was because it appeared on the agenda before it ever went to steering. It came out of planning, went straight to the agenda. Didn't know anything about it. Boom, it's there. Well, we'll try to take it up. We can get in here. We got so many questions. Went back to steering. Steering said send it here. It should have went here first anyway.
The movements of things, and I won't disagree. I kind of wondered why it didn't come up in steering and get pushed to here in the first place. One reason I also held off from the county court the month before when we sent it to this was to let it go through steering to make sure where all they might want to send it.
I don't even know what all that means.
Just
I
running-
no steering when I was
Yeah,
on the
I
county
don't
court.
understand. The planning commission, they make recommendations too, that it's just like when we do the zoning, when a zoning change comes, we make a recommendation that goes to the county commission, not a recommendation that goes to the steering committee.
But we're not doing
No.
ordinance.
It goes to
Or
the.
zoning.
But an ordinance change that pertains to codes
Would be good.
always has went through this committee. That's what this committee does. It screens any proposed code changes. You as a commissioner can propose a code change. It doesn't have to be the planning commission. It doesn't, Sam can do it, a person, the public
I do.
can do it. I mean, so, you know, it's for this committee to hash out all the what ifs and things before it gets to the full body, and all of a sudden you're in this kind of discussion when you've got 2 hours worth of business to do. But that's fine.
And I think
It was my fault that it didn't go, you know, I allowed it to go in that month's business. And I had 3 things this month when she sent me the agenda. I said, we don't have the paperwork, which you're aware of. I said, pull them, tell them it'll be next month until they can get us the paperwork. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna take a harder line on some of these things like this to make sure that we don't get up here in a commission meeting and have a bunch of unanswered questions.
But at least it gave us an opportunity to have a conversation in our work session and have those pieces. It
Well,
got us to where we are.
I enjoyed it very much.
We worked around a good conversation. We worked around a good opportunity. And we get to work, and I greatly appreciate planning commission as you being chair, you being I think you're secretary, is that right, Ms. Marion? I greatly appreciate you being willing. I was certainly hoping y'all were coming. I know, I was kind of wondering if a road commissioner might be here tonight as well. Maybe he'll be at our next one there when we're starting to talk about the sidewalks, part of that conversation, just to make sure where he feels that we need to be.
He's got some strong feelings on it.
That's why I kind of thought he'd be here tonight. Just to be honest
Well,
with
when Sam comes back, he'll tell us whether we need to go before the whole commission or whatever. That's part of what he'll bring back to us.
But I'm saying as far as why this committee and why we go, because you're proposing the ordinance change. If it was just changing your documents, your requirements, then it would come to us, we wouldn't have a dog in the fight. And, you know, that's the purpose of this committee, is to kind of pre-screen. It's the purpose of any committee, is to work out the details.
pre-screen things up front. And I think we've come up with some great pieces here as we go forward. So it's a good opportunity to reflect, make some discussions, make some, you know, we're wanting things to work together. That's what we're doing. And I hope all the public sees.
Definitely needs more talk.
John,
That's for
the
sure.
steering committee is what the old executive committee
I never
was.
knew what they did.
Well, the purpose of it is when something is proposed to decide whether it's ready to go to the full body or it needs to go to committee for further study, for recommendations. Do we have everything?
So really, anything that comes from the planning commission should go to the steering committee first.
Yes.
And not-
Other than zoning.
Other than the rezoning.
On rezoning, it can, y'all are the review for that.
Right.
I got it,
right.
I got
Mr.
a
Deacon.
question. What we talk about tonight, sidewalk and cluster box, is it necessary the local government be involved in there? That should be between the contract and the postal service. And that's the question I'm asking. Should it be involved? We be involved in it?
So, Mr. Dickey, here's where I'm at on that involvement. I think on the, should they do it, should they not do it, those parts, maybe that's a different discussion, but if we're going to require it, as the planning commission would like to do, I have no problems with it, to be honest with you. I think when I talked and found out it's $3,000 a home, we're not talking about a large number of costs there. So those pieces, to me, aren't an issue. What is an issue is having the decisions of how those things are going to be maintained, how those things are going to be kept up in the future, and that's where I think that is our job. I think that would fall on us, because I don't want it to, we could cause issues out there later on by not taking a stand there.
I could develop a subdivision, put in my own sidewalks, sell all those lots, and go, I'm gone.
That's correct.
And then it's up on those people when they need, just like Dwight said, we had them before, these places where they came in, dirt road, bought land dirt cheap, built their houses. They're gonna be sitting, they're gonna fill this place up like they've done before. If y'all been on the court as long as I was, you've seen it, you had to deal with it. They're gonna tell you right quick, I'm a taxpayer, I pay my taxes just like you do, I want you to fix them. So if we can manage it now,
That's great.
before it gets to that point, we're just that much better off. Heck, it may be 30 years, I may be dead long and gone before a sidewalk needs repair.
I have reached out to Gordonsville, is the only one I've heard back from some other, and I've asked, I talked to the mayor, I said, what do you do with your sidewalks? Who maintains them? Is that something the highway department does? What is that? And he told me that they have had very little maintenance as far as the cost to the county, which they do maintain. He said, I can't remember the last time I had to repair that. So I think, which I would still do my research and reaching out and seeing how much it costs, but I don't think it's gonna be, I think everybody's saying it's gonna be a bigger expense than it is. The sidewalks in town that were done a couple of years ago, those have been here
100 years.
yeah, 2 lifetimes, and not had anything done to them. So I don't think I think a lot of people are thinking there's gonna be this huge amount of maintenance, and I don't
If you
think.
let them go 100 years, they're probably gonna be in bad shape.
Exactly, but it's just.
My part's not on thinking when it's gonna be, my part's on, we wanna get ahead of it to make sure we got a plan.
Let me try to speak to Mr. Dickey's question. The state legislature, anything that's 5 acres and up, we have no say in, period. Tracts of land that are developed under 5 acres, we can set the rules and regulations. How big they can be, how far the house has to be off the road, what kind of roads, where the road is, and this is just an extension of that. This is something else that's come along because of the post office regulations is what's thrust this upon us, I guess you'd say. But we already are telling them, we're not telling them what they have to do. We're telling them, if you want to do this, this is what you have to do. You know, just like the state tells you, if you want to get in that truck and drive home, you got to have a driver's license and a tag on it, and insurance. It's no different. You don't have to build a subdivision. But if you are, this is what we expect you to do and the way it needs to be done. And it's strictly from a standpoint of safety. And that's where it all comes from. But yes, this is, we're already telling them what to do. They don't want us to. No, they won't just take this piece of land, cut it up how they want to, put a gravel road in there, not even gravel, just mud. And people are stupid enough, I don't care if we are recording, stupid enough to buy lots in there because they're cheap, and then they're going to come back and expect you, Mr. Commissioner, to fix that road that you didn't require this developer to fix.
So
now, that's my soapbox, and I'm off of it.
So as we're here at this point, as we said, we're looking ahead at taking care of the issues that will come later today, instead of putting the issues off to later. And I think that's what I've signed on to do, and that's what I want to do. Try to take care of those issues. They may be tougher on us today.
Proactive instead of reactive.
That's exactly what I'd rather be here this
So
year.
now, is that all we're doing tonight?
I think so. That's where
Okay, we're gonna meet the 18th?
it looks like we're going to wait on a conversation here first from GNRC before we set a date to see when she can get us.
We're not gonna meet until he's ready for it.
That's correct.
You
That's correct.
They just schedule a
I thought, the
meeting.
only reason I was trying to schedule a date was I thought when we postponed,
So
that
we
we
will
had to set a
put it on
date.
the
Not,
minutes.
we'll leave it at
As
that.
long as we can find out by the end of the month and get it on the calendar for the month, I think we're good. So you got at least a week.
Get some things figured out.
Okay, now I have another question. Lonnie, are you on this committee now? Or you just here? Okay.
I am here because the mayor asked me to make sure that the recording and streaming is.
Okay, so let me see. So we haven't made any changes to the committee.
No, sir.
I'm not a member, I'm a representative.
Members present,
I knew you were in there, you same reason, you just here.
members present are here,
My
Mr. Drew.
request.
Yeah. We have 3 absent.
Okay,
Entertain a motion to,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn. Second the motion.
Yeah.
Oh, leave it at that. Did you do that?
What?
Make a motion to adjourn.
I need the numbers.
Yes, sir.
I thought that's what y'all were doing earlier when you, before.
I can't read my handwriting, it hadn't changed.
But I was waiting for the.
2, 1, 3, the top 2 right there
Comments, or you got a
are
comment? I'm sorry.
both for sidewalks.
Are you gonna comment?
these are both sidewalks.
Same number, all of them are the exact same numbers, just the end is 02, 03, and 04.
I'm gonna be up in.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Thank you, sir.
I'm definitely not right here. I mean,
I appreciate it.
But I'll watch it.
We still recording
I'm
now?
pretty good though, I'll go back and watch. Yeah, so if you'll do that.
Well, I mean, you can look and see which is two. They're all, you know, like, you've got a payment.